Thank you for joining today's session on Simplifying Security, a webinar powered by Areta. I'm your host today, Michael Buderman, and I'm a senior BDM here at Areta. Today's session is all about breaking down the complexities in cybersecurity and learning how to simplify your approach to do better protection within the organization. Today, we'll be looking at the tool sets, board reporting, incident response, and leveraging automation and best practices. Joining us, we have two guest speakers. To introduce the first, we have Faisal Janif, who's the current head of security and CISO of Areta, who is a seasoned cybersecurity professional with a distinguished career spanning over 2 decades. He began his journey at CBA and since held senior executive and CISO positions at leading organizations including HP, AMP, Goldman Sachs, Downer EDI, and Marsh McLennan in both Australia and across Asia Pacific regions. Faisal's deep expertise in strategic vision have constantly driven impactful cybersecurity initiatives, shaping the security landscape across diverse industries. He's recognised as a thought leader, serving on advisory boards in the Australian Information Security Association and Continuum Global, and is the founder of the influential Cyber 12 initiatives. Faisal's extensive experience, coupled with his commitment to foster collaboration and innovation, makes him highly sought after speaker and advisor on cybersecurity matters. Our second guest speaker is Jason Morrell.
I think that's the end of the podcast. I think now with Faisal's introduction, I don't think we've got any more time left.
Well, I'd like to just introduce you. I mean, I'm balancing it all out at this stage, but just to introduce yourself there, Jason. Jason is the co-founder of Murfin Group, bringing over 2 decades of experience, rivaling that of Faisal in startup and in the technology industry. He currently chairs the Cybersecurity Certification of Australia and also chairs the Australian Cyber Network. Jason is also very passionate and advocates cybersecurity, driving collaboration amongst startups, industry leaders, government agencies, and academia to make cybersecurity accessible for Australian businesses. Recognised as also a thought leader and speaker, he frequently shares his insights on entrepreneurship, cybersecurity, and private and public sector collaborations rather. His work has been featured.
Calibrations as well.
Yes,
they can
yes.
be calibrations.
His work has been featured in prominent publications in the AFR as well as the ABC News. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Michael. Good intro. Praise. That was very impressive, mate. I didn't realise half those things about you, so I'm honoured to be here.
Mate, I tried to tell you plenty of times, but you just
I didn't listen.
Yep, fantastic. I'd just like to kick off the discussion points first around common challenges around organisations facing cybersecurity and around the complexities around security posture and daily operations. I'll hand it over to you, Faisal, in this space. What are the common challenges that lead to cybersecurity complexity in general?
Thanks, Michael. Where do I start? So if we start from the beginning, as a CISO in an organization, you walk in and one of your remits is build a solid security practice, understand what needs to be done, and then collaborate with your key stakeholders, right? So your key stakeholders are the BUs that you work with. When we start to look at complexities, if we start off with the easy one, which is the tool sets, right? A lot of organizations have multiple tools which they utilize for different things, and they might use more than one, as an example, more than one vulnerability tool. They might have 2 or 3. Now, the other part of it is you get these tools, and for the price that you pay, you get a whole bunch of features as a part of that tool, right? Now, you might have 10 components of that tool, but you're only utilizing 4 or 5. Right? So the rest of them haven't been turned on, configured, set up. So therefore, what you've actually done now is you could potentially go out and buy another tool that covers some of those, because you never really understood exactly what you have, what you've got. So that's one part of the complexity around it. Then you have your people side, right? You have a number of different people across multiple stages, depending on the type of business you are. You have operational technology, you have IT, you have HR, you have marketing. So you've got a whole bunch of different people that are doing different roles and at different levels, right? Then you've got to understand, well, how do you manage the people side? How do you get the training programs that you're building through? What works, what doesn't? How do you adjust? Right. That's another complexity that you have to deal with in order to really understand and make things impactful. There's no point in running multiple training sessions every month, every quarter, right, when it's not getting through. Right? People are just going through, clicking it. If they get it wrong, they just keep on redoing it until they get it right. 8 out of 10 pass rate. Yep, I got it. Move on, right? The third part of it is when you start to look at privacy. So we are very heavily regulated around privacy, around a whole bunch of different data sets that, privacy then falls under, or the data sets fall under privacy. Now, how do you work through that? Right. So there's two parts. One is, again, the people part of privacy. Right. So the people need to understand. When I say people, the staff members really need to understand, well, what does this mean for me? And what does this mean for my organization? And what is the business doing to protect it? Right. Then you have your audit side. In security, you will get a whole bunch of audit action items that are put against your names. Right. And depending on the organization you are, it could potentially get overbearing. You could have 100 audit items put against your name. Right. Then the complexity of that is, well, what are these audit items? What do I need to do? Right? How do I fix these? Can I purchase a tool to fix these audit items? Okay. The answer could be, yep, go out and buy tool X. You'd be able to close 15 audit items because it's got all of those features, right? So you go out and buy tool X, you close off those audit items, but you still got a whole bunch outstanding, right? But then what you've actually done is added to the complexity of the technology stack, where if you knew all the features of the tools that you have, you could have closed those audit items with the tool that you have. Right. So then that also leads to then, well, when can I close these, right? Internal audit will be after you to close it. You might be able to shift the date 2 or 3 times, but then how do you close it, right? Because the other complexity that comes around is budgeting. Do you have the money to do this? Do you have the staff to do this? Right? What's the impact? Right? Where is your focus? Right? Are you focusing on projects that could potentially wait because these audit action items are overdue? Or you then lump that with the last complexity, which is risk. Right? How high risk are these audit items? Have you worked with risk to understand, well, where do they sit in the food chain? Right? That way you can have a chat to internal audit and say, look, we've had a chat to risk. These are very low risk audit items. Happy to shift the date to another 12 months, right? So then you couple all of the points that I've just spoken about, and you're able to now see that security doesn't just mean, well, how do I secure a piece of technology that you're bringing in, right? IT will bring in technologies, they'll bring them in hard and fast. Businesses will go out, some of them will purchase technologies on their credit card, shadow IT. So you've got a whole bunch of different risks that you're working with. But the complexity, when you start to put everything together, right, becomes a bit mind-boggling on, okay, now where do I start, right? You walk into an organization with this level of complexity, where do you start? Where is your key focus? What are you going to be the first cab of the rank?
And that's a really good question there, Faisal. It's quite a complex and daunting thing that a lot of our customers and organizations within Australia constantly tackle. Where do we start? I might hand over to Jason to have his input on this one.
Yeah, thanks. I think a lot of stuff that Faisal sort of spoke about there, and he's coming from a CISO lens. And if I put on my even just the CSCAU hat or the stuff we do with ACN for a second, and look at the majority of businesses in Australia are actually SMBs. And whichever way you define that, if you're defining it as 20 people or less, that still makes up 98% of the businesses. And if you add in the 200 or less, that's into 99 percentile, right? So small business in Australia is a large cross section and obviously the largest employer, yet they're the least looked after. And to Faisal's point, it's confusing enough to run a business in Australia, especially just to try and get your head around employing people, the tax laws, and everything else you have to do to run your business, plus just run your business, running social media, running all these sorts of things. And then you're lugged with, now in this modern day, the technological aspect of it, of running your business and how that all interacts with each other. So the stuff Faisal's talking about there that's confusing, right? At a level when you might have a person in there looking after it for you, and or have someone like an MSP or an MSSP outside there helping you out, which most businesses need, and some of them just don't know how to actually apply that. And again, as Faisal said, they keep getting sold silver bullets all the time. Use this, use this, use this, use this. And in many cases, if you don't have someone professional looking at it and saying, actually, you just need these 3 things or these 4 things would actually do all of that stuff, it could actually save you money, getting a professional in that aspect, but people just aren't aware of that. So I think it's confusing. The complexity is that it's very technical. In a cyber sense, we all talk like we're talking now as we understand it, but then that bubble doesn't get broken into then how do we talk to the general populace so they can understand it as well. So there's that complexity, So I think part of the things like you guys do, well, like Iretta, is that it actually, for the layperson, you can break it down so it's more understandable. That's what the team does, is to say, actually, let's look at what you got here and let's try and do a roadmap that's actually going to be suitable to get you where you need to go to, and using clear frameworks and ways of actually doing that to make an audit and those sorts of processes easier, and that they happen more in the background without impeding your business. Because in this day and age, you can't afford to have impediment to business. Again, we look at the economy and we look at other factors. This is a key thing, but it shouldn't suck up a lot of your energy and time. It should be something that happens in the background and is automated as best as possible. So I think, security teams spend a heap of time managing all these disparate tools, but it is reducing their focus as a security team then on the key focus is what they need to be looking at, So that's the other side of that coin as well. So I think, operational efficiency and, it's going to be increased if we can actually get professionals and professional tools that talk to each other in place as soon as possible. And for all businesses, that should be from the start. You should set up your business with a business name, your tax, and you should have the base framework for your cyber in from the start as well, because retrofitting it can sometimes be a challenge.
That's where it becomes very complex, right? So true to your point, Jason, if you look at the SMB market, right, where do you start? And, you walk into the floor of ASA where the vendors are. Let's just take Melbourne. You're looking around at the size of a football field with booth after booth of vendors, right? As a SMB, where do you start? Which one do you pick first? You go to talk to 10 of them, and there's potentially 10 of them selling you something very similar, but with different dashboards, right?
Yep.
So it starts to become very, very confusing on where do I start? What do I need? And to that point, it's something that, we've been helping a lot of our clients with, and Michael's been leading the charge on that from that client end on, helping them what we call, let's simplify it, right? Let's look at simplifying security. Let's look at what your needs are, and then how do we build that into it, right? It doesn't need to be this huge complex web. At a large enterprise, it does end up being that complex web, right? Just purely because of the technologies there, the way that the businesses are structured. But when we start to build out the complexities of the smaller businesses, we're able to really bring it together and simplify it.
Just on simplification there, Faisal, what's your thoughts around simplifying processes in the lens of cybersecurity? Is this something that is quite important for large organizations or even SMB organizations that Jason touched on?
Yeah, every organization needs, yeah, and it's a little bit more difficult in larger organizations because there's a number of red tapes that it goes through. As an example, if you're hiring in a large organization, and a practical example, in some of the ones that I've been in, the approval goes all the way from ANZ into APAC and then into the US if it's a US based organization, and then it flows through, right? Just to hire one person. And then there's a number of people in HR, including talent, that's involved in this. In a smaller organization, it's a lot simpler. You can just, go up to HR and HR will go up to the CEO, or you'll be able to have a chat with the co-founders and say, hey, we need a couple more people here. This is what it looks like. We've got this growth, and you can have a simpler conversation, right? However, the processes then need to be embedded, right? And what I mean by that is, so if you're a smaller organization and you're, let's just say, going Copilot, all right, and you're using Copilot to write emails. Yeah. So generally when I write an email, and this is just an example, so I'll write an email to Michael saying, hey mate, I need you to help me with this, right? And it usually starts with a hey mate. Then all of a sudden Michael receives an email saying, hi Michael, I would please like your assistance to help me with these below tasks, right? Michael will have a look and says, well, this doesn't sound like Faisal, right? And then you'll probably give me a call and I'll say, yeah, look, I'm trialing Copilot, right? But in the meantime, if you did get an email, right, a phishing email, right, you could potentially think, yeah, Faisal's probably trialing Copilot again and it's typing it in a different way, right? So you need to be able to embed correct processes. But that's just one example. The other big example that we're seeing is business email compromise, right? Where the processes aren't in place, which allows organizations to pay things that they shouldn't have, right? Because the correct processes either aren't being followed or they haven't been implemented. So they'll pay an invoice without doing the due diligence and checks up until the point where they have been breached, and then it's like a moment, and then they go back and have a look at the processes.
So it kind of sounds like there's a lot of processes that businesses may not be doing. What's a good approach to all these risks? Like how should a business start adopting a framework?
Well, you start off by understanding your business risks, right? So it's the power of elimination is what I call it, right? So you focus on your highest risk first and your lowest risk last. And where is your highest risk, right? So depending on the size of the organization, there's different risks which you'll rate higher than the other. And that would give you a good starting point to look at your business. Now, as you go up the ladder in the size of the business, it starts to get a little bit more difficult, right? So then you have your risk teams, and you will need to understand what risk management is, the processes where your data sits, etc. But in my opinion, if you're looking at an SMB size, have a look at what are your key risks around some of the processes that you do. What's really important, right? Because these businesses need to keep revenue coming in. They can't afford to pay invoices to the wrong people. Even a $30,000 invoice will have a significant impact, right? In a larger organization, that'll be a write-off. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And just on that front, Jason, what's your view on that risk-based approach for SMB?
Well, look, I think again, you got to prioritize your risk, right? And it depends on your business as well. So that's other aspects you've got to take into it. And how far you go with that also, you don't want to have an impediment to business. If you're an online business and you make it really hard to make an online sale for someone, especially with that first purchase, they may not be able to complete that first purchase and or return and actually buy again. So it's a real fine balancing act, because you've got to look at the commercial aspects of it as well. So all of us here, and as mentioned at the start, Faisal and I have been around for a long time, and I've done a lot of startup businesses which are outside of cyber as well. So in retail, moving stuff you can think of any large organization here in Australia, we put products through those sorts of organizations. And as a small player, really, in the scheme of things, trying to put things through those systems, if you make that too hard or an impediment in a security sense, and we've got to look at third-party risk, that's another thing as well, is that if it's too hard to do business, you can go out of business as well. So it's again, double side, right? A cyber attack can put you out of business. Faisal mentioned, phishing email, you go send money off to the wrong party. I saw it with a concreting firm prior to Christmas, where they transferred $800,000 to the wrong people, and that meant no wages for people at Christmas and all those sorts of things, right? So there is many aspects to it, and how you turn that dial up. It's a real skill to know the business and what the business does, and then make the security sit around that to make sure they are secure in all the areas where it's most important, and not an imposter business in others. And I think that's the skill of it, and really find balance. It's really easy to say, we're just going to securitize you and basically lock up your business, but then how do you do business? So I think you got to make sure it aligns with the objectives of the actual business.
And
just to add to that, I mean, the old way that we used to do security, where let's just lock everything down, doesn't work these days.
No,
right? You got to have appropriate level security for the type of business that you're securing, right? Taking into account the new generation of employees and the new ways of working as well.
Correct. Yeah, and also it comes down to the budget. So you want to get bang for your buck. So where are you going to get maximum bang for your buck with that money? It's almost that Pareto's 80-20 principle, that you're going to get, 80% of your benefits from 20% of your key or top line stuff. So your top 20% is probably going to protect 80% of your organization, but you need to know what that is to put that in place. And so that's a skill in understanding it, and why you need to get professionals in place who understand both the cyber aspects and business aspects as well. So you can really get that balance right, and adjust as you go along the way as well. If you do notice any roadblocks or any sort of arteries which might not be running or flowing so well, you can then look at that. But yeah, as Faye said, you can't just go in there, and I think that's what some people do, is buy off the shelf stuff, put it in place, and it causes all sorts of flux through the organization when it stops people getting access to doing things they need to do for their day-to-day work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just, something resonated there when you were saying more around a business needs to operate and make money foremost, right? And technology can either propel that or hinder it. And the more technology in either way can skew. But I'm keen to understand, just in your experience there, Jason, what were the key, factors when you're looking at it from a security lens that you implemented in your own businesses to simplify processes, but also add in extra security?
Yeah, well, that and from experience, that is that's the fine art, or the challenging, or the balance of it. So you've got to know your business, but as we've seen from attacks that happened in the past, you sometimes have blind spots. So you've really got to be aware of what's happening in the market more generally, because oftentimes you can think that you've actually secured your business to the best of its ability, and then you'll see an attack that's happened in the wild that you go, wow, we didn't have that covered. And that had happened to us previously, with the business we'd had, where we'd had a client who'd said they'd been phished. So this was a domain name and hosting business, where someone had said, we've been phished, you sold us the email hosting, your problem, right? When we looked into it, it wasn't they'd clicked on a phishing link, but that was the wake-up call to go, okay, we need to have data at rest, jump boxes, our own servers or hosting environments, and what we needed specifically for that business from something happening on our doorstep. But often it could be happening to a competitor as well. So you got to sort of keep your eyes and ears open on what's happening in your industry to adjust that as well. So you can have things in place, and at the same time, I think cybersecurity moves so quickly, you need someone to be your eyes and ears on that as well. And that's why you need professionals who are in it every day to basically be able to assess and tell you what needs to happen. Because again, running a business, the hardest part is to actually look at all aspects of it, and security being such a key one and moving so quickly, it's better to have someone who's got their eye out for you, but always keeping an ear to the ground on what's happening so you can adjust. So I think the pivoting as things happen. We had a close call, and it was lucky it wasn't directly affecting us, but it actually could have been. So I think sometimes you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your success. If business is going along okay, you think everything's fine. That's sometimes where you get caught out. And sometimes your biggest wake up calls, if you can get away as we did, sort of without a scratch on you, that's great. I feel sorry for the people that it happened to, obviously, and that made us change our model of how we educate our people internally and externally on security as well, and putting more security controls in place. But you don't want that wake up call to go off the cliff, Michael, and end up that you're in trouble, both yourself and with your clients. So that's I think the best way to sort of look at it.
Yeah, absolutely right there, Jason. I'd just like to mention that people who have joined this webinar, we have a Q&A at the end of this session, but feel free to start typing your questions via Zoom, and we'll best endeavour to have them answered by Faisal and Jason near the end. Just want to move towards leveraging automation and integration. So specifically around the tools, the technologies that aid in simplifying security, and also how we can integrate security solutions for a cohesive defense strategy. I might hand over to you there, Jason, on this one, around your thoughts and approach.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, look, I mean, and the hot word hasn't come up yet. I don't think we've said AI yet or anything like that, but
it's coming.
It is up. It's coming. Yeah, I mean, we were having a bit
You
of a
just
chat
stole my
beforehand.
thunder.
Yeah, well, I don't want to, and I'll leave that actually to Faisal. I think there is a lot of automation that's been happening from machine learning and other aspects anyway, right? So, and there's a learnt and obviously, select knowledge that we all have. So if you're looking at from a security or orchestration, automation and response, like a SOAR sort of point of view, to for SMBs, I think these are key way to start, and can help with sort of reducing human error, and obviously improving response time. So like implementing that sort of stuff in there. Now, a lot of people obviously in an SMB sense don't have that ability to access that for themselves or set that up themselves. But there are places like where you guys operate where that is part of the service, right? That you can actually get tapped into those sorts of products and services. And I think automating stuff like patch management, you make sure people are up to date, and so you're not having to worry on manual oversight. Updates. People sometimes get a bit pissed off with the amount of updates that sort of come through, but usually an update these days is patching something, right? It's usually a security patch over anything else, right? So if you're going to automate those sorts of things, generally speaking, that's going to reduce your vulnerability or your exposure there. We're always talking about, and from a small business point of view, starting with the base, and building up from there. So I think, often you want to make sure that people have the basics in place, whether it be password managers or multi-factor authentication and, training aspects and all these sorts of things in play that people often overlook, and they're trying to fix something up this end of the river when they haven't got the basics in place. They're looking at tools and solutions and things without actually having the baseline stuff or the basics in place. So I think we probably, in some cases, need to go back a couple of steps before we take a step forward with some businesses. And I think that's probably the key thing. We can talk about tools and tactics and automating things, but if you haven't got those baseline things in place, you could be just leaving gaping holes while you're sort of worrying about stuff that's maybe not important for your business. So build up first and then apply those. But I left a gap there for AI because I know that Faisal want to jump on that. So I'll leave that there and then jump in if I need to with anything else.
Not a problem. I can see Faisal's almost ready at the helm to start talking over me.
No.
He's ready to jump. He's ready to jump. Go.
No, look,
we'll just both go on mute.
AI is a pretty a dangerous topic. Just to sort of go back, where things were, we were at EDR, now there's XDR. So basically what this allows, organizations to do is have a bit more of a holistic view, because it goes beyond your endpoints. It encompasses cloud workloads, emails, networks, etc. Right? So these are some of the good starting points when we start to look at what different businesses can do in terms of, you know, not having multiple tools. Another one is CSPM, so your cloud security posture management tools, you know, such as Azure Security Center, right? AWS Security Hub, Google Cloud Security Command Center. What these do is they automate the assessments and the management of your cloud security configs. Right, they help organizations ensure compliance and security best practices. And to Jason's point, they also help to a certain degree in identifying vulnerabilities. Right. Yeah, and then we start to look at identity. Right, and there's a number of tools that can look at authorizations, access controls. So basically, what they'll do is they'll simplify the management of identities, permissions, and they reduce the risk of unauthorized access. And then, you know, Jason touched on SOAR. You have DLP as well, and then you have your NSMs, right? So your network security monitoring. You know, these are tools like Darktrace, who's one of the leaders in the market. You also have, you know, people like ExtraHop in there as well. And what it does is it gives you, you know, real-time visibility in your network traffic. It allows you to detect and respond to threats more efficiently. But, you know, the list then starts to get more and more exhaustive, and then we start to get complicated, right? So as a starting point for SMBs and mid-markets, you can start to, depending on where your business is, you can start to look at, you know, getting something in simply and then slowly understanding it and then building on that. AI, the buzzword at the moment, what it does, it allows you at the moment to get rid of menial tasks, right? It allows you to get information a lot quicker, and it can potentially allow you to streamline your workloads and staffing as well. I'll leave it there with AI. Jason and I had quite a conversation.
No, I was going to say,
on AI.
you mentioned EDR,
think,
EDR at the top. Was that, do you guys use SentinelOne or what?
No, look, I said we had EDR, as in, you know, EDR came out and then you've now got XDR, right? So instead of organizations going towards EDR, the ideal would be move into an XDR platform,
correct?
Right? Because you get some additional features out of it, which gives you a broader and better security without a significant increase in cost, right? So it's an easier way to protect, detect, and respond.
Yep.
And all of these tools have now, all of these vendors have some form of AI built into these tools, right? So whether it's, you know, the smarts around it, whether it's threat intelligence around it, whether it's, you know, writing queries in native language to help you get to a resolution quicker. So there's a whole bunch of AI smarts that are around these tools.
So Faisal, if I'm a customer, just heard what both yourself and Jason has covered, there's a lot of tools out there, there's a lot of automation. Why would they engage a security provider to assist them in this regard? Why can't they just fire on a switch and just see it sort itself out?
Mate, great question.
That'd be gold, wouldn't it? If we could do that, that'd make everyone's life a lot easier. Why can't we do that?
It would.
It would.
Yeah. You know, it would. You get the ingredients and you try and cook it yourself. You give it to a chef and you get a better result. Right. So look, what we do, right? We work with the clients, right? And the easiest way that I can explain this is, if you look at soccer and the goalpost is as wide as a field and you have 4 keepers in there, it's still easier to score a goal than if the goalposts are a meter wide without a keeper, right? So what we try to do is get you as close to that meter wide. There'll always be a gap, right? Nothing's ever going to be 100%. And what we're able to do is help fine tune the tools to the customer's needs, right? And another example is if you look at, I won't say CrowdStrike, let's say SentinelOne. If you look at SentinelOne, right? You know, an SMB with 10 people can use SentinelOne, right? A global multinational can use SentinelOne, right? What we're able to do is help set up the tool in a way and and advise the customers, okay, so you need this level of that tool, because all of these tools have different levels and different features that come across, right? And they might not know what they need, and we're able to help guide them in what is appropriate for your business. This is what you need. We'll be able to help manage that tool for them as well. We know what to look for. We know how the alerts work. We know how to triage the alerts, and we know how to remediate, right? They wouldn't know what to do with it. Right? Like if you take, let's just say, and I'm going to use you as an example, Jace. You started up.
I'm used to that. Yeah.
You started up a business, and you go out and get an EDR tool, right? Because you're told you need this. It'll help you find things in your business, and it'll alert you to security alerts and all of these things. So you go ahead and you pay someone to put it in there. Now that you're getting alerts, you're not going to know what to do with it, right? Because that's not your smarts, right? If you've got a Scotch business, you know everything about Scotch, your market, the different casks and all of these things, right? So therefore you're not going to know what to do with it, right? Your staff aren't going to know what to do with it, right? So therefore, you having that tool or you're not having that tool is the same thing, even though it's detecting, but you're not responding and fixing.
Yeah.
Right?
So the things you know they're there, but you don't know what to do about them.
100%. So you either go and pay someone to come in and have a look as a one-off consulting, or you go out to an MSSP and say, look, we're getting all of these. I need you to help me, right? So what we do then, which is the difference, right? We help configure the tools, and then we manage it and we fix it. So that headache from your point is gone, and you can focus on your business growth. You can focus on selling Scotch and drinking Scotch. And
that's not Scotch, because that's from Scotland. We were selling whiskey, Australian whiskey, so that's
whiskey,
different.
sorry.
Yeah, Starwood whiskey. Yeah.
Well, I was hoping. I was hoping you'd do a Scotch business, but the point that I'm trying to make is,
make the point.
The business owners are SMEs in the business that they've started, right? They're the business owners are SMEs in the businesses that they've started, right? And we're SMEs in the whole security space. So we're able to help you increase your market presence, profitability, regulatory compliance if you need to, data sovereignty laws if you need to, right? And we're able to take care of that part and allow you to focus on growing and building your business. Right. So we simplify security for you and remove that headache.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like, probably if you use the house analogy, I could probably fix something electrical because I have a rudimentary understanding of it, but I could also electrocute myself and kill myself, right? Like there's an aspect of sometimes where it's better and legally compliant to actually call in a professional, right? So there's those aspects as well. I think these sorts of tools are a bit more complicated than what they appear on the box, and no matter what someone tells you, as Faisal said, you're not going to understand how to mitigate some of this stuff, especially if it's flooding through, or it's at early stages when you need to be doing something about it, and it gets to a red alert status and you don't know what to do, and it's too late. So they're the things you need to take into account.
Yeah, excellent. I think it sort of flows into around what are the best practices then if we're looking at simplifying security. I'm keen just to hand over to Faisal on this one around some practical steps that organizations can take right now to simplify their security frameworks.
I would say don't go out and buy everything. Understand your business needs, understand the type of business you have, understand what your client base is, right? And then work towards, then what do I need? Where do I need to protect, right? If you're more of, and you got different types of businesses, right? So if your business is more in manufacturing, right, then your security requirements would be different to someone that is just a retail shop, right, or an online shop, right? So there's a whole bunch of different requirements here. So that's not a very easy one to answer. It's not a one size hat that fits all, Mike. what we do is we talk to the business. We understand your requirements. We understand your customer base. We understand also what your projected 2-year strategy, growth strategy looks like. And then also, as Jason pointed out earlier, there's also budgeting as well, right? What do you have to spend, right? And you take all of this into account. You understand some of the key and high risk, and based on the highest risks, right, then you implement those controls that will address the higher risk, right? So therefore, that's where you get your bang for your buck, right? And so it's a more of a strategic and calculated way to simplify security, so you just don't go in and buy everything. It's a tailored approach, because each business, each industry has different requirements. You have the SOCI Act, and you have APRA. So depending on which industry you also have the energy sector cybersecurity framework. So depending on which industry you fall in, that's how security needs to come into place.
Yeah,
And-
and I would just say on that, if I could, that training is critical, right? So we keep seeing the stats that it doesn't matter what you see, human error in some way, shape, or form is the biggest imposter business. It's someone making an error, obviously, and usually because they don't know what they're doing or training is not out there. So that's not just training from training your staff point of view. I think we need to train the general populace better. And again, that's something that we need to get to basics. So the government did have the campaign earlier this year, Act Now, Stay Secure. Passwords, passphrases, password managers, multi-factor authentication updates when available as a bare bones minimum, right? But that message is not getting through and not cutting through the general populace. So unpopular fact is we need to start this a lot earlier. We shouldn't be untraining people bad habits in the workplace. This should be something that's done back through the schools, and it should be just as for all kids, like brushing your teeth or putting a seatbelt on a car. That should be part of that, right? So that's a separate thing and something I'm passionate about there. And until we get to that point and it goes that far back into the community, we need to actually basically train people. So businesses, often getting into businesses don't know how to do their tax or tax returns, but they've got accountants for that. They don't know how to look after their cyber needs or their security needs online. We've got MSPs and MSSPs for that. And overarching all that is training. We need to train people, right? So we need to get them tailored training plans for SMBs to make sure the non-technical staff actually understand what they're doing, right? So we need to make that simpler. That is key. Before we go into all the other stuff of doing frameworks and understanding the acts that we need to be compliant and complicit with, we need to get back to basics, I think, before we go to that step. So again, going back to formulate that before we go into talking about all this stuff, I think in Australia, we're a long way behind a lot of other countries on that front.
You're right. And when I speak to my own customer base, they always say the same thing, is that you can have the greatest vault out there with the best locks, but all it takes is a human just to open the door, and then it all comes through.
Yeah, you can have your house with all the security cameras, everything on there. If they're not switched on, if the doors are left wide open, and people are just going to walk in, So yeah, that's critical and key.
Yeah,
well said.
Absolutely. I guess, Faisal, is there one thing that you'd like to add to that before we start getting into the Q&A?
Yeah, the one thing that I'd like to add is security is everyone's responsibility. It's not just the security teams, but it's the entire organization's responsibility. Yes, there is a lot of ownership on the security teams to help build security and that culture. But, if we start to have a look at the SMBs, she'll never be all right. So that she'll be right attitude isn't the correct attitude. We had, over a decade ago, sounds quite some time, we were seeing similar attitudes in DR, right? We don't need DR, right? Until something goes wrong, then you realize, yeah, we do need DR, right? Don't let it get to a stage where something goes wrong and then you're on the back foot trying to rush it. Start slow, start strategically, and work within whatever budget and allowances that your organizations permit, but make a start.
Yep. Yeah, and make it like occupational health and safety, right? This is something that if we go back sort of 20 years ago, when I was sort of, when we were both sort of starting out, occupational health and safety was a thing, right? And now it's just a matter of course. If someone sees a water on the ground, like at a shopping center or something like that, they'll alert someone to put a sign there to warn other people not to get injured. I think we need to start with that in cybersecurity as well, sort of like a security first mindset, and take away all the unnecessary technical barriers. So making security part of the everyday operation rather than sort of a separate task, which I still think it still sits outside of. And there's that blurred line between IT and security, and it's a bit confusing for people where they go, what they do on that front. And that'll make sure that we sort of engage the broader workforce. And I think that covers then and ticks the box on third party stuff, with regards to if you notice something with your clients or people that you deal with, that they can be doing more securely as well, and passing that message around. So noticing, hey, we've put this best practice in place. We deal with you to be more secure. We'd love for you to actually put these things in place. So it keeps you more secure, keeps our customers and your customers more secure as well. So that conversation needs to be opened up so it's more comfortable between business to business as well. So they understand the role that they're taking in maintaining security as well, because the third party risk obviously is something, and then hopefully that passes that down the line as well. So I think those two aspects too need to be just brought in as a general matter of business course.
You're right. Third party risk is definitely becoming more and more of a focus point, especially in organizations that have heavy partnerships and outsourcing different components of their organization. But I suspect that's going to be a completely another session that we'll host in the future.
Another hour there.
Yeah, I just like to remind everyone who's joined to post their questions via the Zoom chat function. We'll get straight into the couple of responses that we have so far, and I'll give both Faisal and Jason the opportunity to then answer that. Just reading the first off the list from anonymous attendee. If a process can be simplified or not depends on the residual risk and regular review of the entire security management system. I believe that that's more of a statement, but I'm keen just to expand on that from your perspective there, Jace.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a point there. I think.
Do you agree with it? Disagree with it?
Well, look, I think there's a sort of almost a three-part sort of statement or question that you could sort of look at that from. So, I mean, it's a moving feast, as we sort of said. I think probably the best way to answer it is that it is an ongoing thing. And at a certain point in time, even if you did a pen test today on your business, that almost becomes obsolete the very next day or as soon as it's actually finished, because it's a constantly moving feast. Or, unlike when you do a financial audit, which is at a point in time and it is amount of money in bank and all that sort of stuff. Once that changes, that sort of past doesn't change, but you could have something in your system sitting in there right now, which is actually bubbling away that you're completely unaware of. What's the average time people sit latent inside a system before an attack? I think it's something like 237 days or something like that is often how long the attackers have been sitting in a system or watching a system before they actually execute their attack. And hopefully they'll remove those cookies and take that out of there. So the regular review of the management system should be an ongoing piece of work. I could not agree any more with that. And I think there's some caveats that sit around it as well, so that it's sort of an agreement, and I think just adding a couple of other layers to it. But it's a decent point from anonymous attendee.
Cool. Faisal, over to you on this one.
Look, there's a couple of different points covered, right? When we start to talk about residual risk means so many different parts of security. Right. So you have your risk around people, you have risk around process, privacy, your tools, your data sets, data sovereignty, regulatory requirements, right? So these all need to be mapped out properly. So yes, it can be simplified based on how you manage your residual risk. The other part of it is, that's best practice, right? You need regular reviews, right? Of your ISMS, of the entire security stack, right? How it's performing, where are the gaps, right? As Jason pointed out, what works now and you pass today, in a couple of days' time could be out of date, right? So then you just need, the way to look at security, I guess, the simplest way is, it's like you built a beautiful garden, right? If you don't maintain it, it'll get covered in weeds and everything will be overgrown, and you'll need to then spend a lot of money to fix it and get it back to where it was.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you for that question. I'll move to the next one, which is more of a question focused to yourself there, Faisal. If you work closely with partners.
Yeah, we definitely do. We work very closely with our partners for a number of different reasons. So one of the most important is we get the right solutions to our clients. The costing side of it as well. And it's not only the security team that works closely with the partners, but Michael and his team works very closely with the security team and the partners that we have, right? So it's a real collaborative approach that we have. And what it does is it gives our clients the best opportunity, right, to secure themselves with the budget that they have and the type of business that they have and the timelines that they're looking at as well.
Perfect. Another question from anonymous attendee. On the surface of the Essential 8 and NIST audit, what other advice do you have for in the SMB space that don't have their own internal IT team? Is there a cookie cutter approach or an element that you would voice this out to the wider community?
CSCAU, SMB 1001. cscau.com.au, SMB 1001.
Perfect.
That has basically all of the elements of NIST Essential 8, ISO 27001, Cyber Essentials, all the greatest hits from all the different frameworks, specifically for small business, basically built in Australia. And it's about to next year be released for international markets as well, going to Singapore, New Zealand, and other parts of the world. But we do have that on that site specifically for Australian business with elements of Essential 8, NIST, ISO, and that'll do the job for $95 to get you started. And if you get stuck, you get handheld by an MSP or someone else that can assist you to basically tick off the boxes or make sure you get covered.
Excellent. Excellent. That's very comprehensive. Just had a quick look at the website. It looks very comprehensive. So thanks for sharing that one there, Jason.
No worries.
Just anyone else would like to ask some questions? I don't have any more to cover at this stage. I'll give it a couple more seconds before we move to close. But what I will do is just have a quick summary of what we have covered today. So in essence, guys, and everyone who has joined today, we've really covered off around 5 key components of simplifying security within the organization. We started off looking at understanding security complexity, covered off topics which Jason and Faisal touched on around having multiple tool sets, duplication of tool sets, then covered around the people, the training that needs to go along with that. We looked at simplifying the security with key principles, also then filtering into leveraging automation integration, covered off some tool sets within the XDR platforms. We also covered off SOAR for SMB as well, but more so around how we can leverage these tool sets effectively. You can also take this in-house, but there'll always be a level of complexity which you may need to engage partners like Areta to assist with what do you do next when something happens within your environment. And then finally, we're looking at the best practices for security simplification. And again, there's no silver bullets. We're keen to, and I guess it really depends on how complex your business is. And if you're in the SMB space, there's absolutely great, there's great content which Jason had shared that URL around kicking off a NIST audit or an Essential 8 audit too. But if you feel that there's a level of complexity that's above and beyond in the SMB space, feel free to engage a partner like Areta to assist. Now, I didn't see any more questions come through. So what I will do is thank our two guest speakers, rather, that's Jason and Faisal, for your time today. It's been fantastic. I'd like to just announce that we'll be hosting an exclusive roundtable event with a date and time to be confirmed shortly. If you're interested in continuing the conversation and diving deeper into how we can simplify your cybersecurity strategies, keep an eye out for an email post this webinar, as it will contain all the details that you'll need to register for the roundtable event. Thank you again, everyone, and stay tuned for the next webinar that we have in store for you.